there was something about it that just made you want to engage with it. You wanted to open it, you wanted to discover what was inside. And
as a creative, we have to define what's the good design again in packaging.
In terms of packaging design, it doesn't get better than this.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this Jury Insights panel for D&AD Awards. My name's Amy Frearson. I'm a design journalist and I'm editor-at-large for Dezeen. And I'm here to speak with the judges from the packaging design category about some of the stand-up projects from the 2022 award winners. Packaging is an area of design that feels like it's undergone rapid change in recent years. Increasingly, the products we buy are arriving in the post rather than bought off the shelf. We've all seen the sort of unboxing experience kind of phenomenon rising in recent years. But more recently, we've also seen a massive shift in response to the growing concern about sustainability, and this has been impacting packaging design in many ways. So I have 4 judges here with me today to discuss some of these topics. Each of our judges has picked out a specific project from among the award winners to discuss. We're going to take a look at each one in turn before opening up to a sort of broader discussion about what makes each of these projects specifically successful, sort of what values they represent, and what we as a design industry can learn from them going forward. So Susanna, I believe you're going to be starting with the project Music Moon.
Thank you. Great to be here with all of you again. It was a real privilege and an honor to get to review all of these fantastic entries. I think the Moon Music Project was one of those that we all sort of said, I love it, what is it? It was a bit of a mystery, but something that was really irresistible. And of course, we go through all the criteria, the idea height, the craftsmanship, and the relevance. And this one, I think for all of us, really checked the box on all 3 levels. It was one of these examples, I think, and you touched on it a little bit already, where we're not quite sure where the product ends and the packaging begins, or vice versa, so that the actual product was really integral in the packaging. I think that was something that we thought was really exciting and something we want to hope to see more of in the future. And it was just for the product itself was a beautiful idea. Of course, it was a donut-shaped, completely white, round ring, almost like a life ring, you could say. And that was something that was designed to be given out during the time of COVID as a gift. And it was really a packaging for tea and cake, which we figured out part of the way when we started to dissect the entry. And it had been beautifully designed, all in white with fiber pressed sugarcane fiber, biodegradable material. It had a beautiful tactility to it. And it was all designed right down to the absolute detail with the topography and the form. So it was really one of those, essential form following function pieces that is just completely irresistible. And then, of course, the idea with the full moon, that in Chinese culture, this represents reunion and coming together. So the idea that you would give this gift to someone would be sent to someone. And then it had this crazy added bonus that you could record through Bluetooth a little message to your friend or loved one, as well as music that you could select and record. So the packaging sort of opened up like a donut shape, and then you could actually, play the music. And after you finish the cakes and the tea, it was a lamp. So it had this multi-level reuse. And then at the end of the day, everything is biodegradable. So, in terms of packaging design, it doesn't get better than this in terms of creating something that has functionality, beauty, relevance, originality, a fantastic piece of work. So bravo. We really loved figuring out what it was and being happily surprised.
I'm glad that was your reaction as well, because when I was looking through the original video myself, I was thinking exactly the same thing. All of these things were really exciting and attractive to me, but I didn't quite work out how they fitted together. But I'm really happy to have had that overview. And I think probably what sort of struck me about this project when I first sort of saw it is kind of this question, like, it's so striking in its kind of minimalism, and I wonder whether a product like this could have been successful 5 years ago. Like, would there have been an appetite for something this minimal then? And is that kind of symptomatic of where packaging is going, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it was striking because we had a lot of packaging in this category from Asia. And a lot of it was very elaborate and ornate, beautiful, beautiful packaging. But this one really cut through with its minimalism. So like you say, it was maybe something, and coming out of China as well, we thought it was something really fresh and new with this. So it was, again, striking with its minimalism, which we know isn't easy to do.
Fantastic. Let's move on to the next project that you've picked out. And I think that's you, Borja, which is a real organic pistachio. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this one.
What I really liked about this was, first of all, the title of the entry, I personally thought it was so direct and clear, the real organic pistachio, so those 3 words, real, it felt really affordable, really, simple and straightforward way of packaging something that usually you find in so many other packs, and then the cliches around this type of products and when they are packed this felt really truly different and real. Like, you could almost, the texture of the pack could resemble a little bit the texture of the actual product. This dusty type of a surface, and it felt really relevant and how this was translating into the material of the packaging. And then organic, so it also felt really organic, stripped down, simplified way of putting it all in a pack, and that felt, had this kind of a sustainable quality to it. And then pistachio, so the title was very direct and very true to what the packaging proposition was all about. So what I really liked was this stripped down, simple, authentic. It almost felt primitive, in the way it was put together. Very, very contrasty typography. The illustration felt a little bit also primitive, so going back to the way the fruit is raised and harvested, and it was a perfect match with what they were trying to convey with the pack. I also personally liked very much the powerful illustration and labeling, inviting the viewer to go around over the top and around the sides of the pack. So you had to read and turn it around and flip it around and discover more on the size of it. We were having a discussion of how much illustration, because it's the same illustration used across all packs, and we were discussing maybe there was a lost opportunity of maybe using more illustrations, different illustrations for each pack, but then that would have delivered a message of maybe being too elaborate or sophisticated, and this is not about that. So we also felt that was quite relevant, that they use the same illustration, very consistent, very bold, very iconic. And we felt that, this pack proposition really jumps out of the shelf. It's truly bold and attractive, and it breaks the mold against the sector and the competitors. So for us, it was a perfect example of less is more.
Yeah, I think for me, this project actually kind of really sort of struck a chord with something that Susanna, you wrote in sort of an editorial you put together for D&AD ahead of this judging, which is, you sort of said in the digital age with the decrease of prints, packaging is kind of one of the last remaining physical channels for graphic designers. And I felt this project really kind of exemplified that. I feel like, I guess it's the sort of question that kind of rises out, is like, is there an opportunity then for packaging to be like a real place of like experimentation, just going beyond that sort of what is essentially like the simple brand image and sort of typography, to kind of really being experimental with illustration or imagery, or the sort of relationship between, this sort of, particularly like with this product, this kind of 360 where you sort of turn the product around and follow the image around the packaging. Is there a kind of real opportunity for experimentation here? Okay, next up, I believe Yeonju, you're going to introduce our next winner, which is COLOURFORM Ruinart Second Skin.
So with this project, when it comes to luxury, responsible luxury, it is very difficult to define and visualize how it should look like. We are in a place, Susanna already mentioned about with the mooncake packaging, but we are in a place where we need completely rethink how we package things, in particular in the luxury sector. We've been over packaging for decades, adding more and more layers with all sorts of materials, leathers, molded plastics, foams, fabric, without being conscious of our choices. And this really needs to change now more than ever. And historically, the brands want to display their status, and in turn, consumers demand this level of luxury. But then it changed. Consumer doesn't demand. Maybe even faster than brand, the consumer doesn't really want this kind of over packaging anymore. They want something simple, something they can easily recycle. That's the shift. And so this luxury needs to be redefined, I think. And this is why we, as a judge, were seeking this year. This project really define what could be the next step as a luxury product, as a luxury packaging. And in my view, this champagne bottle, which they have as a second skin, is it's really championing the material, the process, and how we are gonna recycle it. So every step in the process of making these bottles has been all considered. And it is very minimal in terms of its shape, its weight, color, graphics. However, it still delivers the luxuriness, the feeling of premium. And like when you open the bottle, the paper snap. It's all one single piece. There is no additional Velcros or glues, nothing. It's just one single piece that you mechanically open with a snap button. And then that's it. That's how you open the package. And it's just setting the next generation of examples, being the luxury packaging. And it's 100% recyclable. It's not about the recyclability, it's the weight, the amount of weight they reduced. If you think about greenhouse gases during the transportations, this packaging is a big issue in that sense, which we can't see. We easily see like, let's change the paper to plastic, then we kind of react about it. But when it comes to the greenhouse gases in packaging, we don't really see the transportation, the distribution, and the weight of it is the real issue. So I think they considered all that part, and they even considered how much water they use to make this product, this packaging. And they reduced their greenhouse gas, the carbon footprint, by 60% from their previous packaging. This, I think, it has to be championed in many, many, many directions, in many, many views. And for all these reasons, I think function, aesthetics, fitness for purpose, and environmental considerations. And I think this, we have to acknowledge that this is outstanding. And that's, I think it's from all our judges, we were like, oh, this is an incredible piece of design that we have to champion.
Absolutely. I think it's that kind of project where you just can tell instantly, can't you, that it's something that can have a real impact. And what I kind of personally really liked sort of seeing this project is it's sort of, you get the feel like it's kind of really pushing the boundaries of what's been possible in paper, but to a degree it almost isn't, because this kind of technology has existed, it's just never been considered luxury. So the real sort of skill here is sort of taking a type of it's a type of packaging that's essentially been used in like egg boxes for decades, and sort of repurposing it and making it feel luxury. And sort of, I guess it's sort of helping to kind of change our mindset. And I guess it made me sort of think about the fact that for a long time we've kind of considered, specifically, I guess, in this type of packaging, we've sort of associated plastic with luxury. The idea of having something in a sort of a piece of hard formed plastic around it, sort of being something luxury. And I guess my question sort of in response to that is like, are we actually really seeing a kind of change in mindset? Are people finally sort of starting to understand that paper can be a luxury material and plastic no longer is a luxury material?
I personally, I mean, it's in a way, it's so simple, and yet it's a complete game changer because it sets the bar really high. The great thing about this is the fact that you've stripped away all the plastic and you've still maintained this amazing premium feel. The other thing that I think we loved was the fact that it's a blank canvas. So it's something that, and I know they're doing, you can be really creative on as well. So it's not something that has to stay the same all the time. It can completely change and evolve depending on, I don't know, the limited edition that you might do. And so in a way, whatever you present now in the form of luxury, this will be your benchmark. It will be almost like we are too much plastic. We are too elaborate in the way that we've executed this. And actually it's almost, it's too much in a way. The simplicity makes everything else seem forced. And it means everything else kind of feels like you're trying too hard. And that's, for me, that's why this is really interesting. It's a complete game changer in that sense.
Fantastic. And I we kind of touched on, Yeonju, you sort of mentioned this sort of element of them being very transparent and sort of laying out all the facts about how much water was used. Like there's a real sort of sense of transparency to that. I mean, from all of your experience, is that something we're starting to see more of? Or is this a rare case? And are we at the point where consumers are demanding this level of transparency yet, or have we still got a long way to go?
Absolutely, but it's changing a lot, but I think there's still a lot to go, I was thinking these days, what would be the relevance if we see the packagings now, maybe, you see the amount of sugar content in the package, in the cereal boxes, in the red, you flag it. You can't package with graphics, attractive graphics for cigarette. Is it time actually the customer see in the package box as carbon-free, the amount of carbon footprint it has been used to make this package? It is something that we need to get informed. I think that's quite crucial part because, a lot of people, produce a lot of carbon footprint, carbon emissions while they are manufacturing it, and then they don't share it. And if you don't share it, we don't really realize how much it has been damaged to the world. And we just, think, okay, as long as it doesn't use plastic, probably it's fine. We can put in the recycling. But all these things, we created methane gas when you go to landfill. There are so many things that we need to consider. And so I think it will be great if there is a way the consumer actually see how much carbon footprint it has produced to this package, and then you make the right choice whether it looks so beautiful, but then it has used a lot of energies and waters. Then do I really want to buy this product?
Well, let's move on to our next project, our number 4, which Emma, I believe you're going to present, which is, I want to pronounce this correctly. It thinks I am MIKAN, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually quite interesting, I think, in the ones that we've talked about today, because we've, I guess, in a way, highlighted very different aspects and parts of packaging design. The reason I chose this one was because, when I looked at this one, it just sparked joy. This is something that I kind of saw from across the room and immediately wanted to pick up. There's such a simplicity to it, but at the same time, so much of a kind of engagement and emotional connection with something which is essentially just a cardboard box. So I remember walking into the room and just seeing these little eyes looking at me, and I was like, what is that? What's it for? And I think the beauty in the piece of packaging as well is the simplicity of it. It's not overly designed. Every element was really considered. There was a kind of honesty in the slightly kind of raw texture in the printing and the material, obviously, that it comes in. And then I think just generally, we all agreed on it. There was something about, I guess, the humor to it as well, the simplicity of like where they put the eyes on the box, that it was over the top of the actual holes in the box as well. So it kind of, I guess, made this simple box become like a little human. It was a little character. And so immediately you had this kind of connection to it. So although it's had a function in terms of like circulating air or, you know, being able to pick up the box with ease, it actually kind of then had the dual aspect of turning this essentially a standard box into something that felt like a person. There was lovely, exquisite detail in the typography and the kind of placement of elements. I think it was just so beautifully considered. And yeah, and then I think just generally, it was one of those things that you kind of wanted to pick up, you wanted to engage with. Yeonju put it on a head because, you know, we then made her the character of the box. I mean, it just had that playful nature to it. And yet at the same time, it's obviously got this serious note to it as well, because obviously there's so much food waste in the world. And this box was to highlight the fact that these tiny little damaged oranges could still be, you know, still eaten, still tasty. And they're kind of things with character. So the whole thing kind of wove together. They had lovely little touches like the plaster that was on the fruit and the eyes as well. So again, you're just starting to feel like you're taking somebody home with you, and you're, you know, in the same way that you would put a plaster on your child when they, you know, scratch or hurt their leg, you know, you're doing the same thing with this damaged fruit. So yeah, from every kind of level, it was just some lovely touches. It really made you see, I guess, the fruit as a thing, like an object that you should take care of and consider, rather than kind of just dismiss and throw away when it wasn't perfect anymore. So yeah, I just thought it was genius. I just thought every element of it was so good, and I just wanted to take the box home with me. I just knew my kids would run around with it on their heads as well. So yeah, just lovely, lovely piece of work.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to be charmed by this project. There's something about just kind of personifying those little mandarins that just really captures the imagination. And I think I'm the same as you. I kind of love how all these kind of little details, really there's function in each of them. This idea of like creating an emotional connection between you and the object, so that then what would be bruises and things you'd see as imperfection become sort of somehow something you have like greater tolerance of and almost empathy for, which is just fantastic. Yeah. I guess the question, there's sort of quite a simple question here, which is really, I guess, you know, we know that joy and emotion are kind of key aspects in our products, but is that, I guess, is that becoming more important, less important? Are there factors that are kind of meaning that joy and emotion are more important than ever?
I don't know. I think there's a set, like, packaging can be quite serious now, can't it? Because it, like the project we've just talked about, there's so many aspects of packaging that we have to really consider and that are really important. And, you know, the way that we package everything has, you know, so much meaning, and it should, you know, have all of the depth to it. And, you know, we should, like you say, be transparent about how things are made. And there is I guess, an element of that we might forget also, that packaging should be engaging and, you know, a bit like the box we were talking about earlier, where you wanted to discover more. To me, they're all of equal importance. Like, there's such a lovely thing about seeing something, be it on a shelf or, you know, in somebody's hand, and wanting to pick it up. And so objects or packaging that does that, I think, is still as vital as every other part of packaging that we need to consider these days.
Well, let's talk a little bit now. We've sort of seen all four of the projects that you selected. Obviously, there are a lot more of the winners, but I guess it'd be a nice kind of point to sort of, I guess, discuss. Maybe each of you can tell me a little bit about what I guess you sort of saw were the kind of the biggest sort of trends, or the sort of biggest kind of messages that you sort of took away from looking at the sort of the entrants and the projects that you chose as winners. Susanna, maybe you can start.
Sure, of course. No, I think that we talked about this a lot during these days together, and we had fantastic guidance from Donald and Adam, and you know, this criteria to sort of back up our motivation for what we were promoting as good, with this idea and craftsmanship and relevance or fit for purpose. But I think what really underlined that was this aspect of sustainability, and that it was we're in the middle of this shift right now, which makes it really exciting. And maybe in the past we have been looking at, design, material, execution and craftsmanship and layers and foils, and we've sort of haven't had that aspect with us for that many years, sustainability that is. And I think that those pieces that we saw this year that were really, if we could say, immaculately designed, if they had checked all the boxes and the criteria, but they didn't have considered aspect for sustainability, was really difficult for the judges to motivate promoting that forward. Even if it wasn't fundamentally part of those three main criteria, because it's just really so essential to everything we do now and should be doing forward. So there were a few instances, I think, where we had, brilliant work that didn't maybe make the cut because didn't quite hold up on that aspect. And that is, I think, something that we should really, talk about with the criteria for packaging moving forward, because it's something we can't really ignore, and shouldn't, of course.
Would anyone else like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would add, I think there was a strong component on, besides what Susanna has mentioned, on the storytelling and narratives behind each idea. I think more and more brands are trying to communicate what they stand for and what their ultimate ambition is in society. So you see, when you judge packaging or any other category, sometimes, in the past, it would be much more of a matter of, the visuals and how attractive it is, how iconic, but then the purpose of it is becoming more and more relevant. And then this idea of inclusivity, as we saw a lot, packing for good, all welcome for the impaired, for the visually impaired, all that was also a quite relevant component on entries.
And in this sort of time of, I guess, this kind of growing importance of sustainability and growing importance of kind of brand and values, does this kind of also give rise to this sort of opportunity for greenwashing, or for sort of, I guess, kind of trying to kind of suggest you're something you're not in some way? And how do we kind of pick the good from the bad in that sense?
Yeah, I think that is a very difficult part. And, as we designers, we can't say when we see a design that looks like a good design, from the functional point of view and the visual point of view. But then we have to consider, if this is damaging the world, the earth, then is it really a good design? The defining good design needs to be changed. And then that is not, it's the designer's roles, but it's not only about designer's role, it's connected, collaborative work from the policymakers and the manufacturers. And then it's, we do business globally, and then there are so many, manufacturers around the world, and then we have to work all together as one. It's very complicated matters, and packaging design in particular, has a huge responsibility on this, environmental issues. So I think, we have to, as a creative, we have to define what's the good design again in packaging. And, we try to, aim for what is a good design and what we can reflect, something that we can't see but we might see in few years, decades time. So I think that's quite difficult part that everyone have to come together.
The other thing I was going to say, sorry, just really quickly, is I think it's really important about what Yeonju is saying, because it, in a way, the responsibility is on brands and designers to work together and collaborate to produce something that consumers don't have to find complex, that they don't have to decode. I think we have to constantly strive to make all of those changes as much as we can, and think about the impact of what we are producing, because all the categories that we saw, you had small batch through to kind of mass, production. And if you think of small changes that huge companies can make in the way that they produce things and the impact that would have, I think that that mindset and that attitude change is kind of what we have a responsibility to really drive. So almost by the time it gets to the consumer, it's so easy because all of those positive changes have been made.
I'm actually going to slightly come back to one of the points you also made there, Susanna, because I think it sort of ties in with something I was thinking about earlier, which is when you're sort of saying, you know, packaging is ultimately, we don't need so much there. And it made me sort of think about the kind of, I guess, the sort of the golden era of the unboxing, which was maybe sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago when these videos were absolutely everywhere. And I guess my question is, what does the unboxing phenomenon look like in the age of sustainability? Does it still exist in a new way, or is it over? Like, you know, is that sort of experience of taking all these layers of something off, does that go? And hopefully, is that a good thing?
Exactly. It's a very good question and a very exciting question, I think, for us. And it's almost like we come back to the sort of milk float situation where if we can implement that kind of change, you know, all the way back around to that, that's where I see that we need to go with refilling and using, you know, reducing packaging as much as possible. You know, what do we really need? But it's a very good question, and this is where this is the exciting part.
Yeah, I want to mention this packaging entry for Opal camera that was 100% paper recyclable, you know, and it was reduced to the minimum volume of material, and the unboxing experience was amazing, with a minimum amount of ink and materials and pieces. And so it feels like what you just said, you know, this is the future of sustainable packaging, but the unboxing experience is still there, and it's still highly tactile and immersive in terms of, you know, how you use the 5 senses in unboxing, but then, you know, it ticks the boxes of every sustainable aspect, you know. So I thought that was an amazing entry as well.
Yeah, I want to add on that note, because you know, one big change in packaging design is actually, you know, instead of the consumers going to the retailer and getting product, it is now delivered to your doorsteps. So in a way, between the brand and the consumer, the relationship actually starts the moment you open the package. You know, that's how you want to communicate with the brand. And I think it's as a, you know, experiencing these brands with the consumers, it is very important to have a incredible emotional unboxing experience from the product you bought online. You know, that's the moment. And so therefore packaging is actually the first step where you experience the brand. So I think so still, you know, even though the sustainability is the key role in packaging design, but, you know, doing this kind of visual and like a tactile experience when it's delivered to your doorstep, I think this is a very important point that we have to, you know, unboxing experience is still, we have to, you know, make.
Yes, it's finding new ways of engaging, not in, the engaging doesn't come through 20 layers. Like we saw with the I Am project, it's like engagement can come in other ways as well. So it's finding those new ways, isn't it, to make those connections.
And as well, that the camera packaging that Borja mentioned, I think that was also an example of something you definitely keep. You would keep the camera in that case. So it wasn't at all a throw out. It was really almost part of the product. And that was, again, where does the packaging end and the product begin? It's almost that you couldn't find the product in there because it was so well integrated, so meticulously designed. It looked like a Dieter Rams piece of, you know, industrial design, and okay, this is the camera. Oh, okay.
Great. I think that's probably all we have time for, but I think there's some really, really exciting opportunities and some really, really fascinating messages in there. And yeah, I'm excited to see where the world of packaging goes in the next few years. just like to take the opportunity to say thank you to all of you judges and the other judges as well who weren't here today. Susanna, Borja, Yeonju, and Emma, really appreciate all your comments. And that's it. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Very much.
Thank
Our pleasure.
Bye.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Take care now.